You know, it's been kind of the trend, especially, you know, the past 10 years, you know, ice fishing, you look at mobility, you look at moving around, using your electronics to find fish, and fishing through areas until you come across aggressive fish, and you don't stop and start fishing until you find them. That's one train of thought that day in and day out can be so effective out on the ice. But there's also room, and there's also a time and place for realizing that, you know, not every day you're going to find those aggressive fish. On some bodies of water and some fisheries, because of forage cycles, you're just going to have much tougher fishing where looking for those windows, looking for those aggressive biters, you're just spinning your wheels, and at some point you just have to realize you're going to have to bear down on a location and spend some time on the location to fish for tough fish. And that's what we're doing here. We've got tough fish below us. You can blame it on the weather, you can blame it on a lot of different things. We can run around and try to find some biters, but the reality is this isn't a very big lake that we're on. And we've drilled enough holes today and marked enough fish where the realizations come in that we're just going to have to roll up our sleeves and figure out the little things that these fish want.
Several factors can create a tough bite. Common triggers include cold front conditions, lopsided forage bases, and fishing pressure. Finesse presentations are sometimes necessary when conditions do get tough. Soft rod tips or spring bobbers paired with light line are critical when panfish get tough.
There's a good fish. There. Love when bluegills dig. Wow, the big circle. There. Beautiful fish there, look at that. Oh. You know, it's kind of the age-old question with fishing. You know, do you move and look for fish that want to cooperate, fish that are aggressive, or do you roll up your sleeves in one spot and try to catch fish that are just tough? And what we're doing here is we're fishing for the tough fish. These fish have just been lockjawed, but you know, with the right mindset and the right presentation, sometimes you can get these fish to bite. And there, that is just a big old bull. We'll get this fish back down in the hole here. There. You know, one big trend the last few years is use of these spooler reels. Now, in my opinion, day in and day out, if you have a decent bite where, you know, especially where you're bouncing or quivering the rod tip, I believe a spinning reel is usually better, probably 90% of the time. But on your toughest bites, what happens is you have to do a lot less of nothing. Where you might have to work the rod, work the bait to bring those fish up, but then you have to almost hang and dead stick the presentation. And when you have to hang and dead stick that presentation, that's where the schoolie reel or the spooler reel can shine. And you know, people have been using schoolie reels forever. Schoolie reels are a great option. They're just a cheap plastic reel. And the thing about a plastic schoolie reel is that they're very light, and so you can do a really delicate quiver with the rod tip. The disadvantage is the gear ratio. And so that's why so many people have gone to something like this. Is just elite spooler from Clam. This is a very good option for just a straight line spooler type reel. But you know, the thing about this is that you can manage your line so much more effectively, in the sense that you just work up a lot less twist with this type of a reel. And so it's not for everything. It's not a silver bullet where, you know, it's something that you need to use all the time. But when you have to roll up your sleeves and really encounter really difficult fish that stop from a long ways back and are very cautious as the fish approaches the jig, and that jig has to do basically nothing and not turn or spin, that's where these reels shine. And when you get in these toughest bites, that's, you know, it's definitely a tool that can help you catch fish used in the right way. There. You know, the thing is, when fishing's tough, one of the first things you'll notice is that these fish just don't come up very high. They just don't have a very high ceiling. And the other thing that happens is that you can just see by watching them on the electronics is the fish are just really timid, where they're cautious as they approach. They often approach the bait really slowly, really deliberately, and just a matter of letting it hang, giving that fish time to swim up to it. But And lastly, when you reel in fish, the other thing you'll notice on a really tough bite is, as you're reeling in fish, all the other fish scatter. When fish are aggressive, typically you reel in a fish and there'll be a couple of them that follow it up even higher in the water column, and you get those different factors that you can see on your electronics, and you know that you're going to have to roll up your sleeves and change your tactics. There. Wow, look at that. I just love that. A lot of tussle for their size. We're fishing about 20 feet of water. These fish are about 3 feet off the bottom at the most, and they're not coming up any higher than that. They're pretty stubborn, but this type of situation, I love using smallest jig I can get away with, but also pretty partial to using tungsten in these types of situations because you get such a small, tiny profile jig, and the weight of tungsten just takes out all the memory in the line, just makes the entire presentation, everything from bite distinguishing to how the presentation looks in the water, everything becomes so much more sensitive from that extra weight. Potato chip there, but that's the system. And you see, one of the disadvantages of using a spooler reel like this is it does take a little bit longer to get down. In some cases, it takes a little bit longer to get up. But when you get there, you can just let that jig just hang without any twist or spin. There. They just dig. And when pan fishing does get to be a finesse game, it does make it fun. There. You gotta reach down and grab each one because they'll break the line. And I'm just using 1 pound test. I think that's the key too. When you get on a tough bite, boy, there are times, and we've seen it down in Iowa, we've seen it in a lot of places where if you're not using 1 pound test, you're not going to catch fish. And I think it's just a water displacement where these fish come up and suck on it, and with 1 pound test, there's a lot less resistance where that jig can get in the fish's mouth, and then you can distinguish the bite. Even 2 or 3 pound is just too much resistance in 20 feet of line where those fish they're not sucking in hard enough where you can distinguish any type of bite. But get that fish back in the water. That's just so much fun. These fish can actually break your line, and that's the fun. But in my mind, when you do get on a really tough bite like this, I'm real partial to live bait. I'm real partial to wax worms. I love using wax worms when the fishing does get really tough. Wax worms are just subtle in the water. They flop around and they've got a lot of scent and they're soft, and so these fish can just grab them and hold on to them with their mouths. But spikes are another option in some situations. Even wigglers can work really well. But the flip side is that wax worms tear off the hook really easy. They're not really durable. You're not going to catch several fish on a wax worm or two. But for triggering bites and for just having that scent factor, they're tough to beat. There. What we're fishing today is just a small little dam or reservoir in western North Dakota. And there's so many of these dams that offer pretty decent bluegill fishing, not just in North Dakota, but even Nebraska. There's several lakes that were formed when they made the interstate. And the thing about these little reservoirs is that the water level a lot of times fluctuate quite a bit. And as a result, in some of these dams, there's not a lot of weed growth, but the fish really relate to these channel edges. If you can imagine, these dams, there's a creek at one time or some type of a drainage, and so there's different branches that come off, and the channel a lot of times, do an S curve, and so a lot of times you have these little fingers and little bumps off the channel, and that's usually where you'll find these fish. But so a topographic map is invaluable, fishing these types of lakes. And the really small lakes, a lot of times you can't go wrong just fishing right on the hole that's right off the dam. some of these larger dams that are maybe say over 100 acres in size, a lot of times it's more channel orientated, and so you're trying to find where the channel curves, or where there's fingers that come off that channel, where you'll get little points and sharp breaks that come off, and typically that's where you're going to find those fish just stacked up relating to that. And you know, we're in 20 feet of water here. Right behind us is 16, 17, 18. There's just a little finger, and basically we're just off that deep shelf. Where at one time it was a creek that wound through here, and these fish are just, you know, just hovering right off that mouth of that channel. So in a lot of cases, these bodies of water are fairly simple to fish. In a lot of cases, they're not that big, but just a matter of just using that structure. You know, think structure when you're fishing these bodies of water. There, I got them. They dig. You know, they're just barely touching it. Oh yeah, look at there. Barely touching it. Reach down, lift that girl up. Just amazing how light these fish are hitting. It's kind of a concentration bite. You barely move that rod tip, you're holding it still, just waiting for that little bump. And the rod that we're using, just that meat stick rod, just got that sanded glass tip. Works so well for really tough biting fish, and sometimes it even gets to where you can't even see it on the rod tip. You just watch the line. That line does anything, set the hook. That nice gill there. You know, so you get on a tough bite, it's just a matter of concentrating with the right equipment. You know, trying to get that rod tip lined up where you can see it, where your eyes are on one plane. You know, lining your electronics up with that rod tip. Even moving that rod tip so that you can see the rod tip. Having it in a position where you can set the hook, and you see I'm barely even moving the rod. When these fish come in, you have to just hold it almost still and maybe just let that rod tip vibrate, but you're just barely moving that rod. See how I'm just barely even moving it. And a lot of times the bites can be so subtle and so light. But you know, you work with the right equipment, the right mindset, and even on a tough bite, you know, all the fish count the same and they all add up. You can still have a great day out on the ice. And conditions do get tougher. Whoa. Fish is a scrapper. But he ain't very big. There. I love that. There. They just kind of come and go. Oh wow, that fish just stopped this rod. Look at that. I just love that when these fish just dig. You know, they just dig in that circle below the ice. Oh, I can see them coming. I can see them coming. Look at this. Look at this. Wow, look at that fish. That is a dandy of a bluegill right there. You know, that's just a classic case of using finesse to catch some fish. 1 pound test at Spooler Elite Reel, 24-inch meat stick rod. The smallest tungsten that you can feel in 20 feet of water, and that's what it's all about when the bite gets tough. But you can still go out and catch fish. That's what I need to stress, is you can still have a great day even when the fishing's tough. Look at that fish in the water. Awesome. Boy, that was a battler. You know, a fish like that can easily break your line. And you know, one thing to do to just to pay attention to is, you know, I'm using a Palomar knot here, and that's just a Northland Fireball jig. That's just a small tungsten jig, but make sure that you're not, typically you want these jigs hanging so that they're at a 45-degree angle so it's horizontal. But one thing though that I've learned over the years is that general rule of thumb isn't carved in stone. Sometimes you can slide that knot. For example, if you're missing fish, experiment with that angle. Sometimes by just dangling that hook lower where the waxworms are lower. What happens so often on a tough bite is that the fish will actually hit the wrong end of the jig. And so sometimes by just changing that knot around when you're just dead sticking it and letting it lay there, sometimes that's just a way to get those fish to come around and hit the right end of the jig where the hook is. Because if you can cock that jig where that hook is dangling slightly down, it seems like they hit the waxworm end versus the wrong end where the lead or the tungsten is. And so, you know, be real analytical of that knot placement, because some days just the littlest differences make the difference between getting a few bites and missing fish and catching them. Boy, that was a beautiful looking bluegill there. They just get that nice big old hump on them and that orange breast, that purple hue. Bluegills are just a beautiful fish. From our base camp in Devil's Lake, North Dakota, we travel the whole Midwest looking for the best fishing bites. If you like real-time fish reports, find out what bodies of water that we're fishing, just to find the general patterns and techniques that we're using, give us a like on Facebook and hit the road with Jason Mitchell Outdoors.
The Great Plains states of North Dakota, South Dakota, and Nebraska have several small dams that can produce excellent winter panfishing opportunities. On small dams, focus on the deep water in front of the dam, as many panfish will winter over this hole. On larger dams, top locations include underwater points and curves in or near the old creek channels. These fish are often hole or structure orientated if there are few weeds present.
There. They just dig. Oh yeah, look at there. Look at there. Another nice gill. Yeah, they just, pound per pound, they're probably one of the hardest fighting fish that lives in fresh water. But just a battler when you use this type of tackle. It's a lot of fun. Get that fish in the water. There. You know, these fish are fun, and you know, this type of system isn't for everything every day by any means. You're going to lose some fish. You're going to break fish off with 1 pound test. You're going to lose some fish on hook sets. You're going to lose some fish lifting them up out of the hole. You got to reach down and grab every fish. With these small of jigs, it takes longer to get the fish unhooked. And so, you know, the fish are biting good. You know, you don't need this stuff. In fact, it's going to probably hurt you more than help you. But when things get tough though, this type of equipment, you know, this light of line, this type of rod and reel, it'll enable you to catch fish when a lot of other people aren't. I mean, it really can be a game changer. Just a matter of using it at the right time. Because it's not a silver bullet where it's the best system day in and day out. But when things are tough and you have fish that just are tough to trigger, tough to catch, tough to distinguish bites, this right here is the answer.
Jason Mitchell Outdoors is brought to you by Shields, North Dakota Tourism, Clam, Vexilar, Jason Mitchell Elite Series Rods, Ice Armor, Northland Tackle, Cooper Chevrolet, Bionic Line, and Salmo.
To find out more information on Jason Mitchell Outdoors, make their official webpage one of your favorite pages. Find out upcoming show schedules and air times, along with past shows, article and product reviews at jasonmitchelloutdoors.com. Great information on the outdoors is just one click away.